Rain slicked the streets of downtown Chicago, the city awash in silver reflections and the steady drumbeat of a summer storm. Sasha Miller, 28, bolted through the chaos, weaving between taxis and umbrellas with the precision of a lifelong urbanite and the panic of someone moments from missing everything. Her black heels clicked frantically against the pavement, her coat flaring behind her like a cape as she darted across intersections, nearly slipping more than once. In one hand, she clutched her phone, the screen dotted with raindrops and open. To her notes, quick hit answers for anticipated interview questions. Vision statement, leadership, philosophy, 5-year plan. She mouthed responses under her breath like prayers. This wasn't just any job. This was the job. A creative executive. Position at Stratton and Vale. A firm with a reputation for brilliance and brutality in equal measure. She'd prepared for weeks. No, for years. The looming glass monolith of the firm's headquarters appeared ahead, cutting into the grey sky like a blade. Relief surged until a cluster of people on the corner caught her eye. They were crowded around something, someone. A man lay sprawled on the wet asphalt, his limbs tangled awkwardly, unmoving. No one knelt beside him, no one helped. They filmed, they whispered, they froze. Sasha stopped. A war waged inside her. Duty versus ambition, humanity versus self-preservation. Her body moved before she could think. She dropped her phone, kicked off her heels, and ran into the street. Kneeling beside the stranger, she felt his pulse faint. Her hands shook as she began CPR, the motions clumsy but determined. Compress, breathe, compress, breathe. Her soaked blouse clung to her arms, and her breath came in ragged gasps between counts. Sirens wailed in the distance, still too far. Around her, a few people finally lowered their phones, stepping forward with uncertain hands. She didn't notice. She was locked in. The man coughed. A fragile wheeze of air escaped his lips. Then, with blood on his teeth and rain in his eyes, he whispered a single word, Liam, and then he slipped away again. The paramedics arrived minutes later, taking over as Sasha stumbled back, numb. Her hands were smeared with dirt and rain and something darker. She stood there for a beat too long, watching them load the man into the ambulance, not even catching his name. Then she remembered where she was supposed to be, what she was supposed to be. She sprinted the remaining block barefoot, her heels clutched in one hand, mascara bleeding down her cheeks. She arrived 15 minutes late, drenched, disheveled and shivering. The receptionist barely looked at her before murmuring, "They've moved on." There was no room for explanations, no second chance, not even a glance. Later, Sasha sat alone in a diner booth, her coat dripping onto the cracked vinyl seat, a cup of coffee cooling between her palms. Her interview window was gone. Her future, it seemed, had vanished in the space of a heartbeat. She stared out the rain-blurred window, trying to make sense of the choice she made, of the man with no name but Liam, and of the ache in her chest that wasn't just from disappointment. She had gambled everything on a moment of instinct, on a life, and lost. But as the rain slowed and the city exhaled, a quiet thought pressed itself into her mind. Uninvited, but strangely comforting, asterisk, sometimes you miss the train because you're meant to walk a different road. Asterisk, Sasha Miller had long since learned that no one was coming to save her. She grew up drifting through the foster care system like a paper boat on a stormy river, shuffled from home to home, never staying long enough to hang a poster or trust a promise. The only constants in her life were her own grit and the notebook. She carried everywhere filled with sketches, ideas, dreams of the ads she would one day create. Not glossy lies or manipulated fantasies, but real campaigns that told human stories. Emotional truth through bold visuals. That was her dream. That, and never needing to depend on anyone. Now, 28, she lived in a studio apartment where the walls were too thin and the heater coughed more than it worked. She worked early mornings at a bakery, frosting cupcakes with aching wrists and pretending to smile through exhaustion. Every spare minute was spent applying for creative roles, sending out portfolios, and rewriting her resume into a dozen different versions of hope. But lately, even hope was starting to feel like a luxury. The red eviction notice taped to her front door was hard to miss, bright and aggressive like a slap. Her credit card debt loomed like a storm cloud, balances creeping up with every grocery, run or prescription, and the job rejections. They came like clockwork, polite form emails. While your experience is impressive, we've decided to move forward with other candidates. Even the jobs she was overqualified for seemed just out of reach, as if the universe had stamped unhireable on her forehead. Every day was a hustle just to stay afloat. Every night, Sasha lay awake in the dark, her brain buzzing with campaign ideas she might never get to make and fears she couldn't afford to speak out loud. Her one steady lifeline was Zoe, her best friend since they met in a group home at 16. Zoe was a nurse, now warm, blunt, and endlessly loyal. While Sasha burned herself out trying to prove her worth to the world, Zoe reminded her that she didn't have to. You keep giving pieces of yourself to strangers, Zoe said, just the other night, pressing a takeout container into Sasha's hands. Who's giving to you? Sasha didn't have an answer. She never had. Love, support, safety, those were luxuries she wasn't used to receiving. So she poured herself into everyone else, chasing a place she could finally belong. Meanwhile, across the city, in a private hospital suite that cost more per night than Sasha's rent for a year, Liam Carter opened his eyes. The sterile brightness of the room didn't faze him. It was the silence that unnerved him. Everything hurt. His chest ached, ribs sore where hands had pounded life back into him. He blinked as his assistant, eyes red-rimmed from days without sleep, rushed to his bedside. "You're awake," she whispered. "Thank God." Then she showed him the video. Grainy, rain-soaked footage. A woman soaked to the bone. Panic and determination written all over her face, kneeling in the street, performing CPR on him. It had gone viral overnight. "She saved your life," the assistant said. Liam could barely process it. The last thing he remembered was crossing the street, feeling the thud of something behind him, then nothing. But this woman, a stranger, had stopped. When no one else did, she fought for him. Liam Carter, 34, wasn't supposed to be lying in that hospital bed. He was supposed to be halfway across the country, safely in hiding after exposing the corrupt practices that had built his family's fortune. Carter and Hayes had made billions through fraudulent real estate deals, gentrification schemes, and shell company kickbacks. Liam had uncovered everything and leaked it. He thought he'd done the right thing, but the price was steep. His family cut him off, security vanished, and then someone came for him. The hit on the street wasn't random. It was a message: shut up or disappear. But now he was awake, alive. Because of her, he replayed the video again, this time slower. Her face wasn't familiar, but something about her expression lodged itself deep in his chest. Fear, yes, but something else. Compassion, fire. She had risked everything for him, and he didn't even know her name yet. 2 days later, Sasha was back behind the counter at the bakery. The familiar scent of sugar and yeast clinging to her apron as she filled a white box with cinnamon rolls. Her muscles ached from too little sleep and too many worries, but routine had its comforts. She handed the box to a customer with a practiced smile just as a sleek black car pulled up to the curb outside, its tinted windows gleaming like oil. Under the morning sun, a woman stepped out elegant in a tailored navy suit, heels sharp as her expression. She walked into the bakery with the deliberate grace of someone used to power and not accustomed to waiting. The woman's presence shifted the room. Customers went quiet, heads turning. She approached the counter and handed Sasha a cream-colored envelope and a business card embossed in silver. "Marisa Whitmore," she said crisply. "I represent Liam Carter." Sasha blinked, the name hitting like a pebble in still water. "He asked me to deliver this personally." No further explanation, no warmth. Just a nod, and she turned on her heel. The door chime echoing behind her as she vanished back into the waiting car. Sasha stared down at the envelope, her hands sticky with powdered sugar. Inside was a handwritten note in clean, careful script. "You saved my life. I'd like to thank you in person. Dinner if you're willing. No strings. Liam Carter." Beneath it. An invitation, the time, the address, his signature in black ink that somehow felt too personal. The rest of her shift blurred. Around the edges, her mind kept circling the same questions. Why her? Why now? When she showed the note to Zoe that night over takeout noodles and lukewarm tea, her best friend frowned hard enough to crease her whole face. "Rich men don't do charity without a price," she said flatly. "Especially not ones with estates and private lawyers." Sasha tried to brush it off, but Zoe wasn't done. "You owe him nothing. Be careful." But curiosity has always been Sasha's fatal flaw, that and the gnawing sense of financial doom. So the next evening, she went. She borrowed Zoe's nicest dress, scraped her curls into something resembling control, and took a bus halfway across the city to the address listed on the invitation. When she arrived, the private estate looked like something from a dream-lush grounds. High iron gates, the kind of place that didn't just scream wealth, but whispered legacy. The front door opened before she could knock. Liam met her at the entrance. He looked nothing like the polished heir in the headlines. He was thinner now, paler, his left arm still in a sling and a jagged scar crossing his temple. But his eyes were clear and focused as they met hers. No arrogance, no bravado, just a quiet kind of gravity. "Sasha," he said, and his voice held none of the condescension she'd expected. "Thank you for everything." She didn't know what to say, so she said nothing. They sat in a sunroom with lemon water and awkward silences. He didn't press. He told her what little he remembered, how her face had been the first thing he saw when he woke up. "You didn't just save my life," he said. "You reminded me why I fought to do the right thing in the first place." Then he asked the question that stopped her breath. "What do you want most in life?" Sasha hesitated, the words caught in her throat. Trust was not something she handed out easily, certainly not to men in designer bandages. So she offered a tight smile and shook her head. "It's complicated." Liam didn't push, but as she rose to leave, he looked at her with something close to gratitude, maybe even reverence. "You showed up for me when no one else did," he said quietly. Let me return the favor. The next morning, Sasha was back at the bakery when her phone rang. An unfamiliar voice offered her a position: junior creative consultant at a boutique agency with clients she'd only dreamed of pitching to. You come highly recommended, the caller said, though they didn't say bye. Whom the timing was impossible to ignore. It felt too sudden, too perfect, not a gift. A door being opened with expectation behind it. Sasha hung up slowly, heart thudding, staring down at the flour-dusted counter. It wasn't charity, it was a test. Sasha started the new job with a mix of nerves and hope, dressed in her one good blazer, armed with a notepad full of ideas, and a heart cautiously open to possibility. The boutique creative agency was everything she'd imagined on the surface: minimalist decor. Exposed brick walls, cold brew on tap, but the deeper she sank into the work, the more the shine dulled. From day one, she felt it. The glances, the subtle pauses in conversation when she entered a room, the way her co-workers' smiles never quite reached their eyes. The team was tight-knit, cliquish, in a way that made outsiders feel like guests, overstaying their welcome. During meetings, her pitches were skimmed over or gently redirected until someone else reworded them slightly and claimed them as new. When she suggested a campaign centered around real stories from underserved communities, a senior executive laughed and said, "Let's keep it aspirational, not political." The message was clear. She had been hired to be seen, not heard. A smiling checkbox on a diversity report. The sting of that realization left her raw. She carried it like a bruise under her clothes, pretending not to limp. The irony was brutal. She finally had the job she'd fought so hard for, and still she didn't belong. That's when Liam's messages started arriving again. Not flirtatious, not pushing, just genuine check-ins. Little windows of honesty. He sent articles he thought she'd like, asked her opinion on branding ideas, admitted he was scared about what came next. In one late-night voicemail, his voice tight with frustration, he confessed, "My father's trying to erase me from the firm, freeze my accounts, bury everything. He thinks I'll come crawling back if he makes me desperate enough." But Liam didn't want to crawl back. He wanted to build something new, something real. A legal agency that defended whistleblowers, renters, community groups, people who couldn't afford help but needed it most. He wanted Sasha to design it. The name, the identity, the voice. "I trust your vision," he said. "I need it." At first, she was cautious. She didn't trust how easy he made it sound, but his openness cracked something in her. When he spoke about the loneliness of doing the right thing and losing everything, she felt it like an echo in her chest. She knew that ache too well. He talked about isolation, not just from his family, but from himself. "I thought if I did the right thing," he said once, "I'd feel like a better person. But I just feel untethered." And she got it. Doing the right thing didn't come with a parade. It came with silence, with loss, with questions no one could answer. Just as she began to see Liam not as a legacy name in a tailored suit, but as a man trying to rebuild from ruin, Marissa Whitmore reappeared, this time uninvited. She met Sasha outside the agency during a lunch break, her tone cool and eyes sharp. "You're talented," she said without pleasantries, "but you need to understand something, Liam. He's not telling you everything." Marissa handed her a folder, thin but heavy with implication. Inside were court documents, articles, and a photograph of a young woman in an orange jumpsuit, Liam's younger sister, Ava Carter. The truth hit like a gut punch. Ava had been arrested during the fallout of Liam's whistleblowing. The firm for a scapegoat had pinned false charges on her, and while Liam had walked away a public hero in some circles, his sister had been dragged through hell, framed, disgraced. He had spoken out, knowing there would be consequences, but he hadn't known how cruel or targeted they would be. Sasha stared at Ava's face, and all the warmth Liam had shown her now flickered with doubt. That night, she confronted him. She met him in the half-finished space he was turning into his agency officer, raw loft with exposed beams and paint buckets still on the floor. Her voice trembled with restraint. "You didn't tell me about your sister." Liam's face fell, and for a moment he looked years older. "I didn't mean to ruin her," he said quietly. "I thought speaking out would save all of us. I didn't know they'd go after her like that. I was trying to be good, but the system doesn't care about good, it protects itself." Sasha didn't speak right away. She saw him not as the man with power or money or ambition, but as someone just as fractured as she was. Someone who had made impossible choices and lived with the wreckage. She felt the weight of his guilt press against the same place in her where her own regrets lived. The foster homes, the nights she went hungry because no one cared, the jobs she didn't get, the moments she stayed silent when she wanted to scream. And then, as if summoned by fate, the past came knocking. As she left the building, a figure stepped out of the alley, tall, familiar, with that same rough edge in his voice she hadn't heard in years. Derek, her foster brother from the group home they'd barely survived. His eyes were hard, bitter. "You working for Liam Carter now?" he asked, spitting the name like poison. "You know his family tried to shut our home down, right? Carter and Hayes lobbied the city to tear it down for a damn condo project. We almost ended up on the street. We were kids, Sasha." You remember that the words hit harder than anything Marissa had said. Sasha's stomach turned. Her brain spun, memories resurfacing like debris in floodwater. She had never known who was behind the threats to close their home, but now the connection was right in front of her. She stood frozen on the sidewalk, caught between two impossible truths. Liam, the man trying to do better, who saw her, who trusted her hand, the legacy he came from. A legacy that had once tried to wipe her childhood off the map. She didn't know which version of the story to believe, or whether she could afford to believe either. But one thing was clear. The past wasn't done with her, and neither was Liam Carter. Sasha handed in her resignation with a calm so complete it scared her. No fiery speech, no dramatic walkout, just a printed letter and a quiet goodbye. The job she had once dreamed of turned out to be a glass box, glossy from the outside, suffocating within. Her ideas had been polished, diluted, or ignored entirely. Her presence was reduced to a checkbox, her passion to a marketing tool. She realized she had been brought in not to shape the work, but to make the agency look progressive without having to change anything at all. The betrayal sat heavy on her chest as she stepped out into the afternoon light, her hands trembling with the weight of her decision and the world she was walking away from. She didn't call Liam. She went straight to him. Rage burned through, her confusion guiding her like a flare. When he opened the door to the loft, she didn't wait for pleasantries. "You say you want to help people," she said, her voice raw. "But your family destroyed lives. You stayed silent until it hurt you. You didn't speak out for justice. You spoke out when your seat at the table was threatened. So why should I believe you're different?" Her hands were clenched, her breath short. Why should I believe anything you say? Liam didn't interrupt. He didn't deny it. Instead, he turned without a word and crossed the room to a locked cabinet. He retrieved a thick folder, weathered, stained, held together by a single rubber band, and handed it to her with a grave expression. "This is everything I have," he said softly. "Internal memos, eviction lists, legal push orders, names, neighborhoods. It's proof of what my father's company did, how many people we displaced to build their empire. This is the wreckage I came from." Sasha opened the file with shaking fingers. Names she didn't know, families she'd never met. Then her eyes froze on a scanned city document. A foreclosure notice, addressed to the group home where she had lived for nearly 2 years. Her safe place. The only time in her childhood she had felt protected, like she might have a future. Carter and Hayes had backed the development deal that shut it down. The home had been bulldozed 6 months later, and she had ended up sleeping in a bus station with her backpack and a pillowcase full of clothes. She stared at the paper, her vision blurring. The floor seemed to tilt beneath her. Liam's voice broke through, low and regretful. "I didn't know, Sasha. Not then. I found that after I woke up after you saved me. I wanted to pretend it was all my father. But the truth is, I benefited from it. I turned a blind eye until it hit home. I was a coward. I can't undo what was done to you, or to Ava, or to any of the people in that folder. But I can choose what I do now. I want to rebuild what was broken, starting with you." She looked up at him, this man she had pulled from the brink, whose hand she had held while sirens screamed through the rain, and all she could see was that piece of paper, the signature of the man whose blood ran through Liam's veins, the final nail in the door of her childhood. Her throat tightened, her chest collapsed inward. The hope she had started to let herself feel about her career, about Liam, about the idea that maybe she mattered to someone shattered like glass. He had been the beginning of her unraveling, and he hadn't even known it. "I saved you," she whispered, the tears coming now, silent and hot. "I thought maybe that meant something. I thought maybe you weren't like them." "I'm trying not to be," Liam said, his own voice breaking. "I swear to you," but she was already turning, the folder clutched to her chest like a wound. She walked out without another word, down the hall and into the street, where the sky above was beginning to darken with rain again. Her tears mixed with the drizzle as she moved through the city, lost in the knowledge that sometimes the person you pull from the fire turns out to be the one who lit the match in the first place. Weeks had passed, and Sasha was beginning to feel the weight of her past lift piece by piece. She was crashing on Zoe's couch, her few belongings neatly packed into a pair of duffel bags at the foot of the pull-out bed. It wasn't glamorous, but it was safe, warm, real. In the quiet hours, between freelance design gigs and filling notebooks with sketches and slogans, she started therapy for the first time in her life. It felt awkward at first, like peeling off armor she'd worn too long, but slowly, Sasha began to understand that healing wasn't weakness. She set boundaries, said no more often, reclaimed parts of herself she'd long given away. Zoe, ever, her grounding force, never pushed, just made her tea, sat beside her in silence, and said things like, "You don't have to save the world to be worth something." Then, one afternoon, while scrolling through news headlines during a break, Sasha froze. There, under a clean white headline, was her name. Asterisk, whistleblower launches legal firm for eviction victims. Partners with former foster care survivor. Her photo, pulled from social media, appeared just below. Her fingers trembled as she clicked. The article described a new legal agency, built to protect renters, amplify whistleblower protections, and take on predatory real estate conglomerates. It credited Liam Carter as the founder but positioned Sasha as the creative voice and co-founder behind the initiatives. Public identity. A quote from him read, ***, none of this happens without Sasha Miller. This agency is her vision. I just made space for it. ***, her chest tightened with rage. She hadn't agreed to this, hadn't signed on, hadn't even spoken to Liam in weeks. Her story, her trauma, was being used again without her consent. She grabbed her coat, adrenaline flooding her veins, and made her way to the new agency headquarters listed in the article. When Liam saw her walk through the door, he stood slowly, as if bracing for impact. *'You saw the article," he said. *'Sasha, didn't sit. You had no right. That was my name, my life. You don't get to slap it on your project for credibility and call it generosity." Liam didn't flinch. His tone was calm, measured. "I didn't do it to steal your story. I did it because this story needs you. Because when I stood in front of donors and media execs and tried to explain what we're building, I realized I couldn't do it without you. You're the one who sees people, their pain, their stories. It's your voice that deserves the spotlight, not mine." Sasha crossed her arms, lips pressed tight. "You should have asked. I know," he said. "I should have. And if you tell me to pull your name off it, I will. But I'm not offering charity, Sasha. I'm offering partnership. Real power. You'd be co-leading this. Full creative director. No filters. No silence. No one patting your back while ignoring your words." He took a breath. This time, the agency would look like you. For a long moment, Sasha didn't speak. She looked at the glass walls, the open floor plan, the faces of people moving around with purpose. It wasn't the world she had come from, but it could become something new, something better. She saw what it might mean for girls like her growing up invisible, for foster kids whose stories never made headlines, for communities who had only known eviction letters and silence. But she wasn't ready to say yes. Not yet. Not because she doubted him, but because, for once, she was giving herself permission to choose her timing. So she turned to go. And this time, she walked away, not in pain, not in confusion, but with her head high and her power intact. She would decide if and when she returned. She wasn't saving anyone else's story anymore. She was writing her own. 6 months later, the community center was alive, with energy standing room only. A crowd of advocates, neighbors, and survivors gathered beneath bright lights and folding chairs. On stage, Sasha stood tall, her voice steady as she presented a bold new ad campaign, striking visuals, raw testimonials, and a tagline that cut through the noise. * They tried to erase us. We made ourselves louder. The final slide lingered on a photo of a small, nondescript house, her old group home, her story told not with pity but power. The crowd erupted in applause. Zoe, seated near the front, wiped her eyes, chest swelling with pride. In the back, Liam stood quietly, arms crossed, a faint smile pulling at the corner of his mouth. He didn't try to draw attention. He didn't need to. After the event, as the crowd buzzed and the room slowly emptied, Liam approached. He said nothing at first, just held out a small, tarnished key. Sasha took it, puzzled, then turned it over and saw the faint engraving, the address of her childhood home, Her breath caught. "You didn't," she whispered. "No press. No headlines," Liam said softly. "Just people who needed a place to land. It's a shelter now, safe, staffed, funded, yours to name." Sasha stared at the key, emotions, surging grief, awe, cautious gratitude. Then she looked up at him and, for the first time in months, let a small smile rise. "You did one good thing," she said. "That doesn't erase the past, but it gives me somewhere to start." They stood in silence at the edge of the sidewalk as the doors of the shelter opened behind them. A mother with 2 kids stepped. Inside, a teenager carrying a garbage bag over his shoulder followed. One by one, people entered seeking safety, dignity, maybe even hope. A place built not by saints, but by 2 broken people who had every reason to give up and chose, instead, to rebuild.